Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. It's beautiful outside, so I'm ecstatic that you guys are here to celebrate Henry. And wow, this is the 5th edition of the Winter Residency. It's a new residency. It's a collaboration between the Museum for Art and Wood and NextFab. We launched in 2021 during the pandemic, but it worked. And this program is designed for artists based in the greater Philadelphia region who work in the material of wood with the commitment to sustainability and creative approaches. And that's exactly what Henry did this year. The residency took place between January 6th and March 6th and culminated last night with the exhibition opening here at NextFab. And this will be up through May 22nd. So bring your friends. The space is open for second Thursdays. Really nice opportunity to see the work, to see other work, and to get a tour of NextFab. I just want to say a special thank you to the Winter Residency jurors this year. Adam Atkinson, the 2024 Winter Residency Fellow. Emily Edelstein, Executive Director of Craft Now. And Emily Zilber, Director of Curatorial Affairs and Strategic Planning at Wood and NextFab Museum. And, of course, Jennifer Nava-Milliken, our Executive Director and Chief Curator at the Museum for Art and Wood. Now I'd like to introduce Henry. Henry is a designer of experimental home goods in wood using CNC machining and traditional woodworking processes. In his studio practice, Henry playfully leverages these tools in the pursuit of rare shapes, forms that question conventionality and reveal the beauty of wood through its versatility. In this residency, Henry investigated cork, a sustainable harvested wood product. And he's going to share a little more about that process with us. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Henry. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Katie, for that wonderful introduction. All right. Hi, everyone. It's good to see a lot of familiar faces here. Welcome to NextFab. My name is Henry. We're gonna go over a bunch of stuff today, okay? I swear I'll be concise. If you know me, I can talk forever. I love improvising. But we're gonna have a lot of fun. You're gonna learn a lot. You're gonna be telling all your friends about cork, and you're gonna buy all of my cork lighting. So we're gonna go over, who I am, what inspires me, why cork. Then we're gonna get into the meat of the project and the process, and just do a little reflection afterwards. Cool. So hi, I'm Henry. Okay. I'm an artist working in the medium of design objects. So I approach design and functional home decor through the lens of an artist, and I like to think of everything as its own unique little interpretation inspired by the previous one. I'm driven by the pursuit of rare shapes and rare forms. I love unusual materials and unconventional decor objects. And I achieve these goals by working in wood. It's my favorite material. It's beautiful. And interestingly enough, I have a sort of family history with wood. So my grandfather, Jerry Dads, so he was my first inspiration as an artist. As a kid, I was drawing a lot and I learned a lot from him and from my mom, who learned from him as well. He was mostly a sculptor and a woodcut artist and did a lot of woodcut printing. So you can see on the right here, this is his self-portrait. So unfortunately, I couldn't learn a lot from him because by the time I was getting into art, his dementia had progressed to the point that there was nothing to learn from him anymore, which sort of forced me to find my own path. But very luckily, I've had a lot of incredible people in my life who have pushed me to achieve a lot, given me a lot of inspiration, and I really couldn't be here without them. I'm going to name all of you later individually. So my first, introduction was going to Drexel University for product design. And I just got obsessed with using the CNC router to make, sort of sculptural wooden objects. And I started to figure out that I like to make a lot of the same thing in very, very different ways. So my first obsession was these little kind of topographical dishes and incense burners. I got really into doodling in a really dense style. I love intricate detail and just like getting lost in the weeds. Next, I got really into lighting design. If you saw my senior thesis at Drexel, that's all I did. If you are looking at the wall right here, I'm still obsessed with that. It's just something that brings me a lot of joy. And most recently, I got really into mirrors. Just another fun object to sort of project my ideas onto, and I've been having a lot of fun with them. The one on the left here was recently shown at Commonweal Gallery, right down the street over there. Check them out. They have a really awesome exhibition right now. The one on the right is at Dud House on 3rd and Arch right now. Shout out to Dud House, incredible gallery. And so kind of one of the central philosophies that's driven me is why can't our furniture just be cool? We're in just such a minimalist state of the world right now when it comes to home decor design, and there's plenty of reasons for that. But something that really excited me was thinking about the possibilities, and the first person to really introduce me to cool furniture is this guy in the middle here, Carl Durko. I did an internship with him summer of 2021. He's a wild, interesting, very creative person, and him along with my friend Dave here, who is my coworker, we did a lot of incredible projects that summer, and I learned a whole lot. You can see this table, which is at the Bach Bar. If you ever go to the Bach Bar in the summer, look out for this fiberglass table. That was the largest thing we ever worked on. It was quite fun. But Carl introduced me to a furniture show called John L. Dud. And this was my first time seeing just like things I'd never seen before. And it was just so exciting. I was just looking at every single thing and just following every single artist. And this show continues to go today. And if there's any designers out there, the open call is up. Definitely encourage you to apply. Yeah, it was just a super cool show. I got the privilege to go up there a couple times. And in 2021, I got to see the work of Daniel Mahalik, who is a cork artist. And this was my introduction to the idea that furniture could be just made of cork. And his work is incredible, super, super knowledgeable and passionate guy. And he, dabbles in everything from furniture design to decor design, a lot of mixed materials. And I had the pleasure to work with him at Peters Valley School of Craft up in the Delaware Water Gap in North Jersey. I took a cork turning workshop where we turned on the lathe cork for the first time. It was really cool. I really loved it. I made some fun little bowls, and Dan actually sent me home with some blocks of cork, which was really wonderful. I got a chance to continue working with it even after that weekend workshop was over. And so, when looking at this residency and the application for it, I was like, well, hey, cork is a wood material, and the theme of this residency is reclaimed wood. Let's just see what they have to say. If I was just like, let's just use cork. It's a reclaimed wood material, and it's a 100% sustainable and zero waste material if it's used properly. So that kind of answers the question, why cork? But I think we got to talk about what is cork first. This is a question people ask me a lot. So cork is the bark of the cork tree, which is a crazy coincidence. It's grown in primarily Mediterranean regions. What we're looking at here is the Montado region in Portugal. It is a preserved multi-use agricultural land which has been used for growing cork and olives and for vineyards for thousands of years. Since the 7th century, it's been protected by the government. And it is a economically and ecologically a balanced area. It is a wonderful buffer against desertification, which is the sort of phenomenon of, as forests are dying off, the desert is moving in, and a lot of that is due to development and climate change and things like that. But with these very well maintained lands, we can provide a buffer against that. And at the same time, while we're growing cork there, cork needs a lot of space in between the trees. So you can grow other things in there like wild grasses. Um, I mentioned the vineyards and the olive groves and stuff before. But what likes to live in native plants? If you said native birds in your head, you're correct. So what we're looking at here is the imperial eagle. It is a Eurasian species of eagle, and it thrives in these lands. And it is one, these lands in the Montalto region are just the perfect habitat for it. Also, the Iberian lynx is one of our feline species native to that region that thrives in this habitat. And so, these are both top of the food chain predators, but as you can imagine, if they're there, that means that their food is there. And if their food is there, that means that their food is there. And as long as this ecosystem is supported and maintained the way it has been, this can continue indefinitely. And luckily, as long as we continue to support these lands, this can continue to happen. So this would be the definition of sustainability. We can harvest these cork trees without killing the cork, right? So the tree does not actually come down when you harvest the cork. The cork is peeled off every several years, 7 to 9, and the tree remains standing. It's really incredible, and it allows these habitats to continue. Unlike a lot of monoculture logging industries where, yes, the wood is sustainable, you can keep renewing and regrowing it. You're not supporting the habitat in the same way with these native plants. And so that's why cork is so amazing. So when the cork is harvested, they take the cores out of it, and that's one of the ways you can get wine stoppers. The other way is through the agglomeration process, where the cork is ground up and pressed back down using heat, pressure, and a proprietary binder that no one will ever know about because it's impossible to ask them these questions, which is what I'm going to get into next. I bought a whole block, and I decided, well, why not? Let's figure out how we can recycle this. So that's the gist of the residency, and we're just going to get right into it now. What were my goals? So I wanted to create a series of cork lamps. It helps to have just an object to project the ideas onto for me. That's how my brain works. So lighting is a very comfortable thing for me, and seeing it through this lens offered a new perspective. I'm going to collect the shavings from turning these objects on the lathe. We have these lathes over here at NextFab. They're beautiful. And the idea was to press these shavings back into new blocks or into lamps themselves or into lamp parts. So I really was hoping that we could find a way to throw out absolutely nothing. And spoiler alert, we did succeed. I also wanted to assess the viability of the zero waste process because, it is one thing to say, oh, we didn't throw anything out. It's zero waste, right? It's also another thing for it to actually be accessible to people who don't have a gigantic factory on their hands. So that was one of my main goals, was see, can this actually be done on a small scale, both economically and in terms of time and in terms of the tools that are available. All right, let's get started. So at the beginning of the residency, I was having a little bit of a difficult time knowing what to do. If you've ever gotten into a new space and you have a time limit, it's a little intimidating to just be like, all right, I'm ready. I know what I want to do, and let's just do it, right? It takes a little while to get settled in. So what I did is I actually worked on this other project. The show for this has not been announced, so I won't talk about it too much, but this was a new experience for me to work with hand carving and power carving on a small scale. And this was in walnut. So this is a piggy bank. It holds 1 quarter. And this is a really fun project. It was the first thing I did here. And it really just got me comfortable with the tools. And it kind of actually led into these lamps that I started doing. And so I, was working with carving away the material before turning it on the lathe. And it was producing some interesting results. I was really enjoying the process of putting something on the lathe that I had cut into already, and you get some interesting shapes out of it. So you can see this is the first lamp that I made. It's visible over there if you want to take a closer look at it. But yeah, I ended up getting into some more intricate studies and kind of testing the limits of the material too. You might recall Daniel Mahalik gave me a block of cork, just like this big, after that workshop I did. And so I was kind of using all of that while I was waiting on a larger block that he was supplying me. So that was a good opportunity just to test out, some of these forms I had in my head and, how to work with the material and the scale and, get back into the flow of it. So the next part is the recycling process. So this is really interesting. Right here, we have two different ways to recycle, and these are not me. These are two different artists. On the left is Dan Mahalik. He was using a method called expansion molding for this chair. So what happens with expansion molding is this is the traditional way that they would recycle cork. Using the natural resins and the bark and the branches and all that stuff, they'd grind all of that up at once, put it in a kiln, and allow the heat to melt those resins, and it would agglomerate that way. So that was a really interesting process. Unfortunately, the cork I was getting did not have any of those virgin materials in them, so I couldn't do that. It would be really cool though. On the right, you see this is a chair made by Sam Sherman. Shout out to Sam. If he ever sees this, he was the best. He's a RISD, Rhode Island School of Design grad student. And he's also working in cork right now. And simultaneously, we've been communicating about this because he found some really good findings on how to do this entire process in the same scale of shop that I have. So you can see this chair that he made was pressed back together with an alternative binding agent. And my goal was essentially, what can I do with the turnings from this process? So, a lot of dust and waste comes out of this process. And, it's a shame to throw it away, but it is really interesting, honestly, how much comes out of just turning this one little block, because so much air gets in between the granules that it becomes, larger. And I was like, oh my God, I have so much to work with. So the first thing I did was I tested it out with wood glue, just to, why not? Everyone has wood glue in a shop. And if this works really well, and I've heard that it works pretty well, then this could just be the way to do it. And that's the most successful way. So you can see here on the left is me just pressing this wood glue into a mold. It was well, we'll look at it. It kind of didn't really work. So apparently you need more air to reach the glue for it to cure. And with the sort of mold that I was doing, it kind of sealed itself off as the top layer of glue started to cure. It would seal off any of the moisture that could get to and cure the rest of it. So that was kind of a problem because as soon as I tried to get that press out of the mold, it would just fall apart. So at the same time, when I was talking to Sam, he posted this little design, and I was like, all right, like, what are you using? Like, I need to know what actually works, because I was struggling at that point. And he told me about this thing called Trasig aromatic binder. And that's aromatic as in the composition of the chemical, and not necessarily, it doesn't smell good. It actually smells pretty terrible. So yeah, you can see here, I made a new mold, and I pressed these little circles out of it. This second mold was more of an experiment, not just in this material, which you can see is kind of floppy and it's a little silly. It acts more like cork. It's a little more rubber. But yeah, this is more an experiment to see, like, okay, what kind of intricate shapes, like what kind of detail can I get out of this process? Because eventually I want to be able to use this for something. I also tested out this latex-based furniture paint from Rust-Oleum because I just had it laying around, and I was like, why not? It didn't work at all. It fell apart immediately, but that's okay, because I actually was like, whatever, I still have it. Let's just like mix it back in with that urethane. And it kind of worked. I mean, around the corner here, after the show's over, you can go look at all the experiments, and it kind of worked pretty well. It reacted in a bizarre way, and it's not really consistent, but it's kind of cool. It's just blue cork. I also tried wheat paste. So does anyone know what wheat paste is? Okay, so wheat paste is when you take flour, you put it in water and you boil it, or you get it to a boiling point, and it becomes an adhesive. The gluten just becomes its own adhesive. And this is used a lot in in printing and putting up posters. Like when people put those posters up on the walls around the city, they're using wheat paste. It's biodegradable. It costs almost nothing because it's just flour and water, and it dries pretty quickly. Unfortunately, it didn't really work. It cracked almost immediately. It got moldy. It would have been amazing. That would have been just the absolute like miracle aha moment, but it just didn't work. So here are the findings. So the urethane by Trassic is the best. I'm shouting them out mostly because it's really, there's nothing really like it on the market. It's in this photo, you can see another piece I made with that exact same urethane. It's used in the making of rubber flooring. It's for like playgrounds and stuff. So it's an adhesive that's a binding agent for the rubber. So it's kind of perfectly suited for this task. It doesn't need heat or intense pressure, unlike the expansion molding technique or the sorts of things that they do at the factory. And that also means that you can use it with the basic shop equipment, right? So that was ultimately the goal. How can we make this an accessible process? Literally all you need bar clamps, maybe some packing tape or tuck tape or any of that like resin mold release. Maybe some MDF or some foam or something to make your molds with. But you don't need anything special. You can just take the stuff you have around the shop and do this. All right, so now we're gonna bring it all together. So as you can see, I went a little crazy in Blender, which is one of my favorite modeling programs for sketching. It's really easy just to like make shapes, and I have these fun shaders I work with that give it like a sort of cell shaded look. And if you can make your sketches look fun, it's like it's so much more enjoyable. So I had a lot of ideas, and kind of riffing off of some of the design languages I'd been working with before, as well as thinking about how the cork actually works in terms of the block that I got it in. So there's a lot of cones, there's a lot of flat objects, things that can just be cut on the lathe or pressed into shape. So those are sort of the constraints I was working with as our manufacturing processes. And so yeah. Here's just the one design I decided to go with. I needed a starting point. So it's a basic floor lamp. It uses a turned cork cone and recycled cork, fins or shades on the edges, and a glass globe in the center to diffuse the light. So back to this block of cork, I began cutting it up. So yeah, resaw blades on the bandsaw are amazing for this. It doesn't gunk it up. Which is something people ask me a lot, like how do you cut it? Does it work? Does it fall apart? No, it kind of cuts like foam or like an extremely soft wood. It doesn't have any grain direction, so you can just kind of cut right through. I put it on the lathe, and thank you, NextFab. This is an amazing lathe. It's huge. I was just so excited to be using this gigantic thing. And yeah, I mean, this project wouldn't be possible without the lathe and the tools here. So yeah, got to work turning it. So, wood turning is, a traditional process of, shaping something. It's, for anyone who's unfamiliar, it's usually used in the construction of banister pillars or baseball bats or candlesticks, things of that sort. And it's a very fun process. It's one of my favorite things to do. Unfortunately, it is incredibly messy. So that was just from turning that one block. And there was actually more off screen that I had already shuffled away. There's cork lining everything in my apartment right now, and I will clean that up later, I promise. So yeah, so let's get to putting it into molds. Yeah, so I'm mixing the cork together in a 20% binder to 80% cork ratio by volume. This works pretty well. So this binding agent is interesting. It is slightly toxic. Like you don't want to eat it. I've gotten it all over my hands and I'm fine. I think, but it's not totally inert. So that is probably the biggest downside of this whole thing is you do need to be pretty careful. Don't breathe in the vapors. But once it's in there, it works incredibly well. It's so consistent. It's so uniform. It cures very quickly. Yeah, and you really don't need that much pressure. So you just regular bar clamps, press the molds together. In 24 hours, you have your part. So we can see here one of the successful parts. And you can see here one of the unsuccessful parts. So yeah, this was a turning point in the whole process. The mold completely failed on this attempt, and I have a couple ideas for why. So for anyone else who might want to try this in the future, My belief is that not enough air could reach the urethane to let it cure, because just like with the wood glue, you do need some moisture and some airflow to allow this stuff to cure. And I think because I used this mold before for the same process, the urethane had coated it enough that it became almost a vacuum when I pressed it together. And I used maybe a little bit too much urethane in this particular instance. And so it closed any gaps that could have potentially allowed for the curing. So when I lifted up the mold, it stuck to the top and bottom and it just didn't cure. It was just mush. And as a result, this whole mold was destroyed. I couldn't reclaim it, which is a bummer because I was trying my best to not purchase any materials for mold making during this entire process. Sort of going along with the theme of reclaimed wood, I was just taking scraps from out back, which is awesome. Like I love to do that, but sometimes you just kind of have to bite the bullet and go with something new. So I really like this quote. Success is measured by how well you can pivot. It's a quote by I made it up. It's something that I learned a lot in school, and so I decided, what the hell, let's pivot. Let's try something new. I took a break from that project, and I was like, let's just make something simple, and like work through this material. And I had this idea. Okay, so I had been making these inlaid dishes several years ago using the CNC, and just like throwing in some abstract patterns. And if you remember, one of my favorite things during school was just doodling and making weird shapes. So I was like, well, why not? Let's continue that in my pursuit of rare shapes. I'm going to see what happens when I combine these things. And luckily, we have a tool here called the rotary indexer. It's a CNC tool. I'll show you what that means. It's not that scary. But essentially what it does is you can plug in a programmed file and it will carve that shape that you give it. So I got to work making some shapes. So you can see here, I unwrapped a cone, right? So this trapezoid thing in the center, it's a cone unwrapped. And I made some tool paths that sort of matched that. So I was mapping out the shapes that I wanted. And then to get it to work with the software, I had to stretch it so that it was a perfect rectangle, because a cone has a smaller circumference at the top than at the bottom, right? So stretching was important to retain the geometry. Yeah, so you can see here on the left is what that looks like in the model, in the 3D model, when the toolpaths are applied. And then on the right is a little time lapse, and that is the indexer doing its work. So it's rotating kind of the way a lathe does, but it has a router bit that knows where to go because of the program that we do ahead of time, and it just carves it out. Something interesting about this process is, with the software that we're using, I can just take a cone, right? So I made the cone originally on the lathe, and then I modeled it exactly with the exact same dimensions in a 3D modeling program. And that software allows me to take this toolpath and wrap it around that cone. And so that's how I got this to work. It's a little bit of a backdoor to make this process work really efficiently. If that didn't make any sense, I can talk about it later. I'd love to talk about it. But for now, we're just going to move on. This was the result of it. I painted the insides and then sanded back down, and then kind of reshaped the cone and into a more just simple silhouette so that the symbology could speak for itself. And this is all just doodles, by the way. I get a lot of really interesting comments about what they think people think that these symbols are, and it's really exciting to hear these things because everyone has a different interpretation. But it's just I like filling space with unusual shapes, and yeah, so I wanted to continue to do that. And going back to that original piece, the one that failed, then I couldn't follow through with it. Now that I had this momentum from this other project, I was like, cool, let's just do the same thing in sort of a different way. So this is the original file. I stretched it out so that I could fit it on the cone. And what you'll see here is, as it turns out, drill bits are only so long. And to get the lamp wiring to go all the way through, you need one that can go all the way through. So the issue is that my drill bits couldn't reach each other going from the top and bottom. And so thank you, Katie. Katie came up with this idea, and we had a really good talk about this a couple weeks ago about how we can get around this problem in a way that fits the design. And so it turns out you can just cut it in half and drill in from the top and bottom of either piece, and you can kind of get closer because the drill bit wants to wander, like it wants to go in other directions. So the closer you can get the top and bottom, the less that effect actually matters. So I tried out a couple different ideas for how this lamp could look because I still wasn't sure, and I like to just see things out in the real world. And this was the result. So I was able to cover up the seam with the CNC tool paths. I was pretty excited about that. And if you're in this room right now and you're looking and you're like, that does not look like that lamp that's right there. I had another moment of having to pivot. My shipment of shades and cables didn't arrive in time. It's still in the air or maybe on the ground somewhere. Maybe it's in Kentucky. So I had to improvise, and we went with the globe. But that's kind of the advantage of trying out a bunch of things, is you have options if something fails. Okay, so what happened to the recycled cork? Like, weren't you gonna do that? Like, so yeah, I still did it. So I had this other design idea in mind, just to take a simple shape, route the wiring in, and unfortunately, it wasn't actually that simple because it was gigantic. I cut out the mold on the CNC, and this was using just like pink insulation foam. I really didn't want to buy this. I hate this stuff. I want to make that clear. It's disgusting, but it's pretty much the most efficient thing to do something like this. And it's kind of the most accessible. And luckily Home Depot can deliver it, even though they charge $80 for fees. So what I did is I routed the wiring in these two parts ahead of time. And you can see here, you can watch me close the lid on this two-part mold, and then at one point I lift it up and I break the whole thing right there. I lifted it up and I realized that it kind of fell out of the mold when I did that, and it wasn't aligned properly. And that's when I was like, this is gonna fail. The resin's not gonna cure, or the urethane's not gonna cure. It's it's gonna be misaligned. This is gonna suck. I wasted so much time and money. So I kind of peeled it up, and oh, that worked. I had a moment here where it just like all hit me all at once, that this thing that I had been investing so much time, energy, and money into actually worked. And I was like, oh my God. Yeah, so that was a wonderful moment. The next part was like a little less glorious. I had to get it out of the other half of the mold, which was impossible. But I did get it out, and I sanded it for enough time. And and yeah, it worked out really well. And I think I think it worked. The light works. Wiring it was kind of a pain. But at the end of the day, like it was a really wild ride getting here. Yeah, it just takes a lot of you trust your intuition. There's a lot of moments where it just feels like nothing's working out, the world's collapsing, and like what's the point of doing anything? And those moments, it's really easy to just like stay at home and do nothing, which is something I did a couple times. And if I've learned anything, and if I could just speak to anything about this, it really is important to trust your intuition. Talk to people around you. Just be part of a community. It's the greatest thing about NextFab and the Museum for Art and Wood is we have this beautiful community here. Yeah, and just allow yourself to try out new things and fail and experience the unknown. There's nothing quite like making something that's never been there before. That's something that I like to do, and yeah, I hope this serves as some inspiration for someone else. And if anyone wants to work with cork, I got a ton of it still, and I'd love to give it away. But yeah, thank you so much. I have a whole list of people to thank. I'm just going to say it really quick. Thank you to Daniel Mahalik and Sam Sherman for giving me all the cork information. My critics, colleagues, friends, Tim, You're here somewhere. Where are you? Yeah, Tim, Carl, Chris, thank you. Josh and Eric, my other coworkers, everyone provided such great input. My friends knew who they are. Mom, Dad, and Alex, thank you. And thank you, Mom, even though they're not here right now, but yeah, there's a seat for her. I promise I'll get a job later. Thank you, Amarim Cork. They gave me the cork for this project, or I purchased it from them through Dan. Thanks, ShopBot. ShopBot's an incredible. I wish I had a ShopBot, but I'm happy with my CNC. Don't get me wrong. But their CNCs are amazing, and yeah, it's really great. Color cord for the lamp parts and Trasic for the binder. The NextFab staff, Melissa, Mark, Hannah, Chris, Justin, everyone's been so helpful. I mean, it's really a beautiful community here, and I'm so thankful to be part of it. And then thank you for the Museum for Art and Wood staff, for providing this opportunity for people. It's just such a wonderful residency, and yeah, Katie, Nava, Nadia, who did the content. If you saw that on Instagram or elsewhere, really amazing stuff. So I couldn't have done this without everyone on the screen here. And yeah, thank you so much. I'll open it up to questions. I answered all your questions. You have one?
Yes, I have a question. Out of that block you started, how much of that came out of it?
Of the recycled?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so the question is how much of the recycled block ends up in here? Pretty much all of it, actually. I went through all of the cork that I had in this process, which is kind of crazy because it looks a lot bigger when it's in bags and stuff like that. But when it's compressed down, it becomes a lot smaller. So that's 12 gallons of cork, if you're curious. I had to do the math because I needed to know how much binder I had. Yes. I think so. I think I would like to do more research with it and like continue to use it. It's a beautiful material, and getting it out there in the world is just such a good thing to, inspire more people to use it. Right now, I'm actually going to be going back to hardwood. I'm about to head off to Anderson Ranch and do another residency, and I'm going to be sort of following some of the momentum and some of the formal ideas, but I won't be able to ship a block of cork out there. But I really want to, when I get back, continue to do it because, yeah, it's a beautiful material. I still have a lot of it left, and there's a lot more to explore with it. Yeah, so the question is, what's the difference between cork from the block and cork from the press mold with the binder? Yeah, so cork from the block is extremely soft. The grains are larger because it is the first step in the agglomeration process, right? Comes right from the factory. They can do it with larger grains. It's really soft. It's really easy to work with. It hardly chips out. This stuff that's reconstituted, it kind of cuts the same way and it kind of sands the same way. But it's a lot more resistant to a lot of working. So I found it a little bit more difficult to work with, and that it didn't like sand quite as smooth. But the advantage here is that you can just press it right into shape and do very minimal post-processing. So it kind of makes up for it in that way.
So with the reconstituted stuff, do you feel like there was like structural limitations, like in terms of how much weight it could carry when it's standing up?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. What are the structural limitations of the reconstituted cork? Yeah, it is a little bit less stable. It's a little more flexible too. So when I was working on this, I actually, let's go back a couple slides. On that downdraft table, the sanding table, I was lifting it up onto it and kind of like bending it over, and it sort of cracked at one point. Because even though I have armatures in there, it's still flexible and like a little bit weak in some ways, and that's a really big piece. So there's a lot of forces acting on it. The great thing is that it can be, you can just press cork right back into it with that binder, and it just fills the gaps. So it's strong. It's not as strong as the material right from the factory, but it's pretty darn close. Is there color variation when patching it? No, there's none. It's really, really like you can't tell here. I mean, I can't even tell still where the areas that I patched were. It all just kind of, what's the word? Assimilates pretty well. Yeah, it's really smooth and really, really clean. Yeah, this is a great question. I finished all of these in mineral oil, specifically the butcher block wax stuff that normally you coat for like food safe applications. I've used it in the past. It works really well. I didn't test a ton. I have heard Danish oil works great. Polyurethane too. You wouldn't want to use anything water-based because cork is naturally hydrophobic. It's one of its incredible material properties. And yeah, it paints really well, as you can see. So this is a furniture paint. It's a latex based, so it contracts as it cures, and it fills the gaps really well. So it just, it works just like wood in a lot of ways, in terms of what you can finish it with. But yeah, that's just a mineral oil. Yeah.
Do you feel like you had better results with molding cork or like?
Ooh, did I have better results molding or cutting away? I think, okay, so press molding the cork is really difficult because you have to do a lot ahead of time. You have to make the mold, you have to get everything lined up right. It needs to be, correct. The applications I think are larger and broader. Like for example, I can make a piece that's taller than the block it came from, right? In terms of like actually working with it, I mean, working with the stuff from the block is just so much easier. It turns better, it's more consistent. It has, an entire 1400 years of industry and quality assurance behind it. So like there's a lot of expectation of what it should feel like when you're working with it. And the difference with this stuff is just that it's, it's homemade basically. And so it's a little more difficult to work with. Yeah. Cool. Yeah.
A little bit on that. If you had, like, so you can obviously if you had tried to press it back again, and make that, how would you expect that to like, yeah.
Right. Yeah. So the question is essentially, can you continually to infinitely reuse the cork if you pressed it into blocks every time and then shaved it down? That was something I wanted to try. I never got a chance to actually press it into a block that could be worked that way. My guess is it probably doesn't work that well because as you continue to shave it down, the grain size becomes less and less. And then you're getting more, it's just more binder and less cork each time. That's my assumption. If you want to test it out. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's certainly applications for that. I mean, you could certainly do that. I think just at the end of the day, like you kind of don't really need to do it that way unless you wanted to make the same piece, one out of, the cork from the block and then one out of the recycled cork, and just, as an experiment or something. Because you can just make any shape more or less just with a mold. Of course, turning something on the lathe into a cone requires so much less time and effort and energy and material than making a mold of a cone and then pressing it in. So it's a give and take sort of thing. I would say I probably wouldn't go past, shaving this one down and putting that one in a block, right? Like maybe one more step is the furthest you could go. But again, like I think it's room for exploration. Yeah. Yes. I'm so glad you asked that, Nava. Yes, okay, I did the math. I have it in a notebook somewhere, which is locked in my car, which my keys are also locked into. So I couldn't put that into the presentation, but I did do the math, and it is a lot more efficient. Yeah. So if I wanted to make this lamp right here, right, this cone lamp, and I wanted to make two of them, and I was okay with recycling cork for one of them. To make two of those cones with the cork from the directly from the manufacturer is like about $400, and you end up with the waste afterward. To make two cones where one of them is cork from the manufacturer and the other one is recycled comes out to about $250. Yeah, so you're sacrificing like the visual clarity and consistency. I mean, it's honestly kind of very difficult to tell anyway, but yeah, per cubic inch of cork saved, it's what is that like? It's like a 20% or not 20%. What is that? 2.5 to 400. I don't know. Anyway, I'm trying to do the mental math. It's a 5 to 8. Yeah. So it's a like 1.3. So about 103% savings or something like that. It is much more efficient. Yeah, and that was one thing I really wanted to test because, like, look, it's an amazing thing to be able to say that something is zero waste and to not throw anything out just in its own. But to actually prove it financially, like, opens the door for small people like me who don't have the ability to just say like, oh, I can afford to like shell out a little extra to make something recycled, right? And again, that also like goes up the food chain. Like, if a large company can find savings somewhere, that's if it's more efficient, they're going to do it. And if not, they're not going to do it. And how can we expect this stuff to get adopted? It's the unfortunate reality of things. But the wonderful finding is that, yeah, based on my math, it works out that way. It is a lot cheaper. Yeah. Yes. Ooh. Get super ambitious. And just be willing to do anything that you have the ability to do in this space, and then a little extra. The toughest thing I think is just getting started. Like it's really difficult to just get started with a project just from the ground up, from nothing, because you're just gonna be like, oh, I can do so many things. Like there's so many things I want to do or that could be done, or anything of that sort. I think it's just a matter of trusting yourself and have a little little seed, a little thread to go off of. Yeah, and then just be willing to improvise. That's probably the other thing I'd say. I mean, there's so many people at NextFab who can help you with whatever technical issue or question or tool training you might have. And if you're willing to just get a little wild with it, like, I'd say that's the best advice I can give to someone. Cool. Anything else? Awesome. Well, thank you guys all so much for coming out tonight. All right. You take the floor, Katie.
Yeah, thanks. Melissa, you should come up here because you're going to say something. I just want to say thank you for coming tonight and learning with us the whole process of working with cork and the sustainability of it. Thank you, Henry, for all of your experimentation. I want to say thank you to NextFab and my co-person in madness, Melissa, for making this residency a wonderful experience for our fellows, and for all the equipment that's here and for all the support that you give. So thank you very much. Also, thank you to NextFab staff, Hannah, Mark, Chris, and Justin for making all of this happen. And next week is a big collaborative program that NextFab does with Craft Now, and that's Tools of the Trade. I'm going to hand that off to Melissa.
Thank you, Katie. thanks all for coming out. It's a really gorgeous night, and I appreciate you all actually carving out the time to come. And Henry carries a big crew. Last night he brought a lot of people out too. So hold on to these people. They're going to support you through all of your trials and tribulations. We have the Tools of the Trades conference that we host at NextFab with Craft Now, which is our local crafts organization. Any of you who might be recent grads, who might be making things and might not be aware of these kind of organizations yet, they're great to plug into, and they have a lot of kind of directories and resources included. Like Craft Now's website is awesome to check out if you haven't. We have it's basically a business entrepreneur 3-day conference. And for any of you that might be doing your own thing and looking for advice on how to get your work into galleries, how to get your work into stores, how to get grants, all these kinds of things, how to do your taxes, not fun. There's a lot of awesome support that this conference provides. You can get free tickets going to toolsofthetrades.org and filling out the little sponsorship form. We had a generous sponsor that allows us to give those to you, so please take advantage of that. The first 2 days, Wednesday and Thursday next week, are virtual. The last day's in person. You can do in-person workshops here, and then there's like a whole networking event from 4 to 7 with some awesome resources. So if anyone has any questions about that or NextFab at all, please let me know. I'd love to answer any questions for y'all, and I appreciate y'all coming out. And a big shout out to Henry for being with us for the last 2 months. This residency it's challenging to hop in and get started, and I will give Henry the shout out of you did it. You were here all the time. You know, I have to be here. I'm paid to be here, but you were here like you were paid to be here. So thank you for showing up for that. It's hard to do, and especially in a new space. So really excited to see what you've done in 2 months. Kind of insane, and awesome to hear everybody's reactions to it. So thanks for coming out, y'all.